All right, so first off, as you probably seen the title of this video, I'm gonna be showing you how to create some of the more common shapes that do not exist in the shape node, this bad boy. I've removed the 3D view because we won't be needing it for this tutorial, obviously, because we're focused on the shape. So if you're following along, just know that we're not using that. The other thing to look at here is if we go up to the top toolbar, make sure to enable display timings. This is what is going to enable these green timer things here, telling you how long the node is taking to compute. So the reason I have these on is because we're trying to create efficient ways of creating these shapes and not inefficient ways that take forever, because creating a shape is kind of the ground, like the foundation of doing so many things in Designer. So you don't want this to be like super slow and you haven't even done any texturing yet. Anyway, now with all of that out of the way, let us start with our first shape, which is a heart. So let's change this shape node to a disk, right? So bring this down a little, so small. And then let's add a directional warp. Oh, that's crazy. Good. And we're going to be warping this with a gradient. So from the intensity input, let's drag out a gradient. And we can either use the gradient linear 3 or the gradient axial reflected. For simplicity, let's go with the linear 3. It's a bit more expensive, but So let's double click this now on the warp and crank up the intensity. I don't know, 70 or something. So we also want to start rotating the warp angle and you'll see what's happening. Exactly. So let's lock it in at -90 and you'll see that it has created a heart. We'll get to this in a second to offset it, but for now, let's look at what's happening. If I crank this up a lot more, it should be clear. So the gradient is brightest in the middle and darkest on the sides. And that is being reflected in the warping that is happening here. So it's warping based on the direction and the intensity. So the middle is maximum. As you know, in Designer, the whitest values here means the maximum, and the darkest values mean the minimum are 0 and 1, usual stuff. So with that in mind, we know how this is going to work. So the middle is saying push this 150 and the darkest is saying 0. So that's why the sides are being pushed the least and the middle is being pushed the most. And that is how we create a heart. Funny enough. So if we change this offset, we can then bring it back up. And in this case, that actually helps us see the heart without having to add a transform node, which is really nice. But don't be fooled if you then adjust the intensity. It will look like it's going in both directions, but that's just because we offset it, right? So to make this even clearer, what's happening here, we can add a levels, right? And this isn't just to make it clear, this is also to make a different heart. So let's click levels, and as we start to move the midpoint, which is that also called gamma, I think, you can see we're really stretching the circle, the disc, and it's creating those like cute pointy hearts, I guess. But the important thing to note here is that the middle is being pushed really intensely, a lot more than the sides. So if we go back to the warp, let's just bring it there for now. If I start to bring up the dark value, you can see what's happening here, right? The sides remain untouched because there's nothing. It's saying 0, no movement. And the middle is being extremely pushed. So just a little theory to explain what is actually happening so that you can have more control over creating that heart of your dreams. So I'll show you another way to create a heart, and this way is even simpler. So let's start with the disc again. Let's make this a little small. Then we'll add an extend shape grayscale. As you can see, this extends the shape. Let's make this a little smaller. Good. And then we'll add a mirror. So we're done. Keep the mirror in focus, but click the extend shape. And then as we start to rotate this with the extension angle, we'll get a heart. Let's set that to 45 degrees, just cause. And there you have it, the heart. It doesn't look quite like that nice default heart, so let's increase the scale of the disc, and there you have it. That's the heart we know and love. No pun intended. And that's how you would create a heart with 3 nodes. Obviously, it doesn't give you the ability to curve the middle like this one, right? But it depends on your needs. So I think this is really good. This will serve you for like almost all cases you might need a heart, and it's still very customizable with the extrusion distance and the angle. All right, so let's move on to the next shape, which is the droplet. All right, let's just move that up here, and I'm actually going to duplicate the circle here. Double click that. All right, so for the droplet, we're actually going to reuse a bit of our setup. So we're actually going to copy this and let us add another gradient. And we want to use a regular gradient here. It will make sense in a second. So we're going to multiply these. Just click these here and multiply. Order doesn't matter for this. And now when we use the directional warp, actually let's copy this one here to save us time. Let's just put that at the top, put this in the bottom. And when we use this now, if we reduce the intensity and we send it the other direction, we'll see what is happening. It's being drooped and creating a droplet. Let's offset that there. Obviously, if we go too far, it will get too extreme, but you can see here what is happening. And that is a nice droplet. Now, to make it even better or more apparent, we can, once again, we can add a levels. So, I mean, you know, this is a pattern already, and we haven't even created all the shapes yet. So if I put this as the focus and start editing the levels, you can see what happens here. All right. Now, I'm not going to explain every single time I do something, especially when I repeat it, but you can see here what we're doing, right? This is the default, and this is the levels that creates the nice curved droplet. Let's just, right? And the difference is that there's a bit of a rounding at the bottom, or a dark super pitch black area at the bottom, so the circle remains unaffected at the bottom basically, and the brightest point is at the top, but it is a gradient going down the middle, and this is why we get this shape. So pretty cool, nice looking droplet, and we can now move on to the next shape. So without actually changing much of this setup, we can actually create a leaf. It's a very basic leaf, but if we just plug this straight in, like what we had before the levels, and then we adjust just a little bit, you know, just a little bit, you can see we're getting that kind of nice curve in that leaf shape. And honestly, if we use a levels, but we use it differently, right, we can do that. If we added a stem at the bottom, this is a leaf. So you can be creative in that sense and create similar shapes from just tweaking just a few settings. So I'm going to move on to another shape here, and that's going to be an egg. Yes, just an egg, but We all know how annoying that can be sometimes. So of course, I'm going to duplicate these three things to start. So let's start with the circle once again. So we have a circle and we have this gradient. So if I were to plug this in here, I have an ellipse, right? It's being pulled vertically, as you can see the direction, towards the top, and the bottom part is being pulled negatively. That's why it's doing that, right? But if we add a levels and we adjust this slightly, right, and crunch the top a little, you can see now we've created more of an egg shape. Boom, that's done. Very simple, very quick. But believe it or not, there is a faster way and a simpler way to create an egg, and that is using just the shape node plus the trapezoid or trapezoid transform. This does kind of that perspective stretch, right? Either at the top or at the bottom. And as you can see, we already got an egg. Like, it's pretty simple. Now the tiling that's occurring here is, you know, it could get in the way depending on what you want. So you just want to go in the base parameters and change the tiling mode here to absolute, no tiling. Good. Now we have an egg. So if we were to scale this up a little, let's just do, I don't know, something like that, and we double click, you can see the shape is really similar, right? And if we delete this, we already have two nodes, egg shape, the end. So I like that. Very simple way to create an egg. So the next shape is something a bit more practical, I guess, something that you'll probably be using a lot more often, and that is a chevron. So let's add a shape node here, and we're gonna start with a square, well, a rectangle technically. Just gonna do that. And there are two ways you can do this as well. Both are efficient, that's why I'm showing you both. So let's put this down here. So the longer way would be to create a gradient like we did before, right? Good old method we've been using this whole time. Actually, let's just do it. Gradient 3. Rotate and direction of work, right? This is what we've been doing. I think we're pretty sure what is going to happen, especially when we set this to -90. Boom. As you can see, let's crank that. We have a chevron. Now this might look like a useless shape or a simple shape, but this can be used for so many things, from, you know, army badges like the applets, to the end of an arrow, you know, the back of an arrow. There are many ways you can use this shape, but now we have a chevron and we can control how strong that is, right? So there's another fast way we can do this. I would say equivalently fast, 3 nodes as well, but it depends on your needs. So we can actually use the skew grayscale node. So if we take this and we start doing that, it's going to skew horizontally. But what if we wanted to skew it vertically? And in this case, I'm going to choose center, so it skews from the middle. All we have to do is mirror it. Boom, chevron once again. And this is quite straightforward. So now we have, oh, that's the wrong adjustment there. So now we have the chevron. Very simple, and as you can see, the timings here ridiculously fast. Honestly, I'm not gonna add these up. We're not, you know, pixel pinching or whatever the term is. I don't actually know. But as you can see, we've created the chevron in 2 different ways, both very efficient. So once again, that is the wrong setting. So yeah, so this is really useful. I'm pretty happy with it. So the next one is an even simpler shape. But if I were to ask you to create it, you might be like, oh yeah. So let's duplicate this, and it's a plus sign, right? Now, if I were to ask you to do that, you'd probably do this, right? Transform, rotate 90, and then blend them together, right? Oops. You can do a max. Boom, you have a plus sign. Not bad. That is acceptable. 3 nodes, really, really fast. But there's also another way you can do it, and that is with one singular node. Splatter circular. Doesn't look like it can create a plus sign, but it can. So let's change this to a square, right? And let's reduce the pattern amount to 2. Decrease the radius to 0. So now that we have that, we can actually increase the rig amount, right? You won't see a change here, but it'll make sense in a second. Now we want to increase the size just so, wrong size, just so we can see this effect a bit clearer. And now if we go to rotation, the ring rotation offset, we have a plus sign, 0.5, of course, to make it exact. And now we have a plus sign in one singular node. Obviously we can change the scale and affect all these things, and that was really simple. This is one node and we have a plus sign. So sometimes it pays to know how to do some of these things in one node for efficiency. Okay, so there's another starter shape node that I haven't used yet, but I do want to show you that because that'll be cool. So let's create an arrowhead, and we're gonna actually start with the polygon this time, not the shape node. So let's reduce the sides down to 3, bring down the scale a little, right? We want to rotate that, I guess, 90 degrees. And now we can use the techniques we've learned. So to create an arrowhead, you'll probably want to skew this once again through the middle. So let's crank that up and crank that to -90, or is it +90? Boom, we have an arrowhead. Pretty simple, but we can actually do this just like the chevron, plot in a similar fashion, but also not as in a different way. Sorry. So let's set this to center, and now we're skewing this, and then we mirror. Boom, chevron once again. So we have 2 different ways. Oh, I keep editing that. So we have 2 different ways, but the reason why this method is so fun is because you can edit the angle a lot easier, right? In order to edit this, it's also easy, I guess, but it's not as predictable as this one, right? Did I edit the wrong thing again? Yes, I did. Anyway, you see how much more predictable this is to edit, right? Hey, Star Trek. So these are 2 different methods, and I don't have to show you 1,000 shapes for you to understand how this could be useful in creating a lot of other shapes, right? But I am going to go on to a different type of shape, which is a spiral, and that is a bit more tricky. And the fastest way to do that is to use a spline circle. So if we go here, you can see there are 3 spiral options. And I mean, as soon as we pull this to the right, we can see that it moves the start point to the center. Spiral turns does what you would expect. We'll get to the jaggedness in a second. And spiral power is what I like to consider the ratio, I guess, or the bias. So, you can push it closer to the outer circle, outer radius, or closer to the inner. So those are the spiral settings, and that was really fast, of course. But the only thing with this is to use it, right? How do we use this in our stuff? So you can use the preview, and just to show you, let's just do some blend. It doesn't matter. This is the output you're going to get, right, through this preview section. So if we go back here, we can scroll down and you can see the segment amount. We can increase that to make it smoother. We can turn off the arrow, and that's nice. And there's also this gizmo that you can use to actually move the spiral wherever you want. So that's nice. But as you can see, this is the output, and we can change the thickness, but nothing happens, right? And that is because we have to scroll down here and enable show thickness envelope. So when we click that, let me just make this simpler. You can see as I increase the end thickness what is happening. But the problem is we can't see that in the end result. So what you'll usually want to do, basically nearly all the time, is to use a spline render. I don't know why when you type it in, it doesn't go here, but you know. And then we can drag these across one by one, or we can press 2 and do it all in one go. So if you double click this now, this looks a bit different to this, right? Because this has its own segments amount. So we can crank this, and these do not affect each other, right? So it has no effect on this because it's just about the render. So now in order to see this thickness, right, that we have introduced here, let's go to the spline render, and you have envelope spline amount, or envelope, whatever. And as you increase this, you can see it adds more splines based on the curvature. So let's crank that to about 16. I usually don't try to crank this too much because it will increase the cook time. And I'll show you why as well, because you can click the thickness here and increase the thickness of each. Now this might not be what you want, right? Because as you can see, it kind of balloons it out. So just depends on your needs, but I guess we can crank that to 24. Oh my lord. 24, and we can do that ever so slightly, and now we have thickness that we can actually use, right, and see. So we can output this like any other grayscale output. So if we go back to the spline circle, we can then change stuff with the thickness, and again, this is really cool. So you have a lot of control. You can rotate it. Feel free to play around. You can also skew it. Kind of looks like it's rotating. And there are a lot of cool things you can do here. But in the render, there's one other thing that you can do that's really cool, which is to make a gradient going from the beginning of the spline to the end, or vice versa. And to do that, you can change the spline style to gradient. And now we get this really cool spiraling into darkness effect. So, you know, you can adjust this as you see fit, but I just wanted to show this first one before I go into the next method, which is using the splatter circular, which I do love to use so often. But yeah, that's the second way to create a spline. So let's do that now. And if we crank the pattern amount, just so I can show you how it's going to work. If you come down here, there is something called the spiral factor, right? And obviously that changes the endpoint to the center, and that creates a spiral the more turns you make, right? So let's increase the spread, you know, just crank it. 40 is obviously ridiculous. Whoops. So you can see here how that would work, increasing the spread, and the spiral factor will create a spiral, but it's not homogeneous, right? It's not continuous, sorry. And that's not just because of the paraboloid. Yes, wow, I actually got it right. So if you switch this to disk, right, and we change the scale of that, even if we crank these, we'd have to crank these pretty high to get, let's say 512. you know what, that is actually quite acceptable, right? So we can actually crank that, and you can see it's not affecting the time that it's taking to compute. So this is still quite efficient, even though we're using 512 circles to create a smooth spiral. Honestly, I would say it is worth it, right? And that's it. This is one node and we have a spiral, and it's easy to control. We can control the radius, come down here to the scale, the thickness. If you go too thin, of course, you'll have to add more circles there. Increase the scale, and then we can increase the, oh god, the amount of turns, right? So that's fun. I like that. Now, again, this isn't the most efficient way to do it, because we will have to keep cranking the samples or the pattern in order to get a smooth spiral. And if anyone has a more efficient way to create a spiral, please drop it in the comments. I am, also learning. But this is the fastest and crazy efficient way to create it that I have found. And the other reason I like this method is because if you go to any of the random attributes here, parameters, sorry, you can see you can actually start to create some more fun effects on the spiral, and it doesn't affect the spread, right? So that's another reason I like this method. It allows me to change how it looks without doing like some noise and warp. I can just do that right in the node. So that's cool. Let's move on to another shape, which is the hourglass. Once again, this is pretty simple, and I mean, it might be a bit niche as well. Like, why would you need an hourglass, right? But it's the idea of making it that we want to build the skills from. So we're gonna use 2 nodes to create this. So let's do a polygon, right? And 3 sides. Gonna do that 90-degree turn again. Scale it in a bit. Yeah. And now we will mirror this vertically. Oops. Invert that, sorry. And just like that, we have an hourglass, or a Black Widow logo, you choose. The hourglass is obviously softer, so we could go through our process of softening that, which could involve using a blur and then scanning that out from the blur, increase the contrast. And maybe this is what you were expecting, right? But this also counts. So another way to create this hourglass shape is to use a waveform node. So if you use the waveform, now stay with me, let me cook. This will create what we need. We just need to reduce a whole lot of the roughness to start. Then we need to change this to the cosine, right? And you can see it's very repetitive, which is good, because we're going to be, let's just bring that in a little. We're going to scale this down until we get that, and then reduce the middle, because this is the low point basically. And boom, we have an hourglass. We can actually rotate this, transform. I wish it came with a rotate node, but it wouldn't be a waveform, would it? So let's click that and rotate 90, and we have an hourglass. We can actually scale it in if we wanted to get a softer edge, but that's only because it's repeating. Again, we need to go into base parameters and change the tiling to absolute, no tiling. And yeah, so we have an hourglass. It's not the same kind of hourglass, of course, but still an hourglass nonetheless. The cool thing about this method, the first one, is that we have all the shape node properties available to us, so we can start affecting how thin and tall, even like some of the curves. I mean, you can just mess around and get a lot of cool stuff. So let's do one more shape using what we already know, which is an arrow, right? So we know for that we need a triangle, which is a polygon with 3 sides. Pretty straightforward. Actually, let's just leave it there. We'll bring in the scale, and then we will skew it horizontally from the center. Let's just crank that, and the mirror, you know the drill. Y-axis. So now we have an arrowhead, right? So we want to move that to the side. Just carry that over here. I'm gonna make it smaller. All right, don't come for me. Yeah, that's good enough. So let's keep that there, and then we'll want to create the rectangle. Let's just blend that in now. Let's do a max. So with this in the view and this selected, let's just bring down that and bring it in, and we have ourselves an arrow, right? And from what we've learned so far in this video, we know that we can just, funny enough, let's duplicate this for a head start. We can flip this ratio so that it's tall, right? Maybe a little thicker. And we can just double click this to see, but we can drag this in here, and now we actually have a different type of arrow, right? Different arrowheads, and it's the same setup, lightweight as all of these are. And yeah, so that's how to put some of the stuff we've done into practice to create some more obvious simple shapes that you would use day to day. So I'd actually like to go through one more node that I haven't touched yet, and that is the shape mapper, right? So shape mapper, it requires input, so let us find a shape. Let's put in a shape here, and you'll see that this is just a solid circle. Whoop-de-doo. I guess this is another way to create a, you know, a circle with a hole in the middle, right? There you go. But the shape mapper is very interesting because it shows you how your shape would look if it was mapped in 2 ways. One, as a circle. So let's reduce this so it's not filling the screen. So if we reduce this to this size, let's go to the shape mapper. Now I want you to pay attention to the negative space, right? So if we let me just reduce this so it's a bit obvious, right? Good. If I increase the pattern amount or decrease it, you can see that in the middle, the negative space is a circle and the outside is a circle. So it's mapping your shape using the inner and outer shape, which is a circle. So if we change this to a polygon and bring down these sides, you're gonna start to see the same thing. So let's make this a little bigger so it's a little more obvious. Yeah, that's really obvious. And let's start low. 1, 2, 3. What's happening here? Oh, sorry, that's the pattern amount. Whoops, it's the segments I was trying to change. So let's reduce the segments, right? 2 is just a vertical square, and 1 is just a line. Like, you'll probably not want to use 1 in most circumstances, but if we start increasing it, you can see this is a triangle. Let me just bring down the width so we can compare it properly. So you can see the outer shape is a triangle and the inner shape is a triangle, and that's because we set it to a polygon with 3 sides. Now if we increase that, you'll see it's a square, and it's basically stretching the, so it's basically mapping your input shape to these 2 shapes, right? So you can see as I increase the polygons, like we have a, let's do a octagon, right? You can see it has 8 sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So that's what it's doing. So if we change it to a circle, it's doing the same thing, and we can use this to our advantage to create, you know, shapes that we would expect to see. So let's do that. Let's delete, start over, shape mapper. Let's do a square again. Let's bring this in. Now as I start to create this, you're going to know exactly what I'm creating. Let's just bring this to 3. That radius and the outer radius. That's why I kind of like to call the width, right? So we can take something like this. Let me just make this a little smaller. And then we can create another shape. Make this a circle. Bring this in. I will want another circle as well. So edge detect that. And what I'm creating here is, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but you'll see. So let us combine these things. So do a maps. Maps add any of these things are okay. So duplicate that just cause. And boom, just like that, we have a, you know, toxic radiation, whatever sign this is. I can't remember right now. And we can edit the shapes to suit, right? Yeah, that's a lot better. So what I've done, I've used a square to create this, and that's because the shape mapper is mapping it along a circle. So, you know, some of this is trial and error, but a lot of it, if you pay attention to how or understand how these nodes work, you will be able to replicate other shapes quite easily, right? So we can actually use, let's continue to use what we've learned and create some more common shapes. Now these are going to be like decals, because you think about Substance Designer and you just think about texturing, procedural texturing, but you can create decals that you can then slap onto stuff, right? So imagine we made this, you know, let's put it into a gradient map, and you know, we made this sorry, it's the wrong one, an actual sign, right? We can then export this with the alpha, and now we got a decal just like that, right? So just keep that in mind. You don't just have to use Designer for textures. So let's make another decal, right? And I'll do this a slightly different way this time. So this will be a no entry sign, right? Let's just bring that in. And let's use the splatter circular this time, right? We'll change that to a disk and then increase the pattern a ridiculous amount of times to get a smooth circle. So let's make that a bit larger. And yeah, we could probably bring down the scale a little for that, and then combine these, and we have ourselves a no entry sign, right? So that's boom, no entry sign. 3 nodes, beautiful, you know, simple, right? Instead of having to open up Illustrator or some other, boom, you got it, export, done. And you could put all of these in a library of things if you find yourself using them often as well, and then you can use it in Painter or Designer, like it doesn't matter. So let's create another decal here, and I'll use the splatter circular for this one. Let's do a disk, and I'm creating the warning sign. All right, so I'm gonna crank up these samples, I like to call them, the amount of circles there. And if we crank this up but reduce the spread, we end up with a straight line. So I think it's pretty fun. So anyway, let's increase the radius here, and then we'll rotate it. All right, bring rotation, do that. And where's the offset? Good. So let's bring down that offset, and now we have a line going straight up. So we'll want to use a trapezoid to taper this in for the exclamation point. All right, this is not perfect, again, like, you know, we're just doing some fun stuff. And I think this is kind of big, so let's make that a little shorter and offset that. Yeah, this looks a lot better. Now let's create a circle. Yeah, pretty obviously easy. Let's bring that down here, and then transform that down. Transform vertically. Let's blend it so we can see. Max, good. So let's transform this to about here. It looks kind of large. Sure. And then let us do the border, which is a triangle, as we know. I'm hoping we've all seen a warning sign. And let's just bring in the scale ever so slightly. And what do we want to do here? So I want to soften the edge, right? So let's do it the classic way, which is to blur it and then scan it. But instead of scanning, I will use the threshold. It's a lot simpler. I mean, wow, it's almost like no-brainer, one-click solution. We can adjust the threshold as we see fit to be closer to the outer edge of the blur or the inner edge, right? Let's just leave it. Oh no, yeah, let's just leave it there. And now we can edge detect this and edge detect. Make sure we invert that. And now we have that and we can combine them. And this way we've now created, oh shoot. Let's just, anyway, we've just created a warning sign. So that is kind of cool. Yeah, it's good. That's close enough. So yeah, so we've just used a lot of the knowledge that we've gained in this video to create this. So I think we've created enough decals. So to close out this video, I will show you some bonus shapes that I've done. We're not going to create them live. I've already created them, but they'll at least show you how to use some of the tools some of the nodes we've used in this video in, you know, interesting ways or simple ways that you may not have thought of. So I have some of the stuff I did just now, so you can see and plug it in. That was nicer. This is a different version of the thing we did here. Again, the polygon tool can be exploded, right? So this is a square, but if you explode it, suddenly you have like X-Men or something. I actually can't remember what that sign is. This again, polygon 2, the one with the gradients in the shape, and you know, that's like Mercedes or something. So just explore the tools. Of course, we've done that just now, and we've just finished this. As you can see, this is a bit more cleaner. I spent more time on it, but then you can now start to use the stuff I showed you creatively. So the infinity sign is what? It's kind of a teardrop on both sides. And that's just one way to approach it. So, you know, I created a teardrop and I mirrored it and then edge detect. Of course, you know, I make it sound simple, as you can see, but these are the tools we've used so far. So that's a interesting way to use them to get something you probably may not have thought of. Here's another one, much simpler actually. So just a rectangle, and we've just done this 1,000 times, where we skew it and mirror it, and now we have a chevron, add a star, converse. Like, you know, so that's pretty straightforward. So for this one, I actually used a node that I don't think we used in this video, which is the extend shape grayscale, to extend these little shapes and then add them together, mirror them, blend, add on a head, and then add on like the filler in the middle, and boom, I got a bathroom sign, male bathroom sign. So, you know, cool stuff using the tools we've already had. And then for the last one, I just had some fun here with this one. You can just, you know, you can take a look at it. Actually, we can go through it quickly. These pretty obvious. I'm not even gonna double click them. They're shapes, right? And one polygon. Edge detect, we've done that before. Trapezoid, we've done this before as well. I will say, if you combine the bottom and the top, you can kind of stretch. You can taper stuff a lot more extreme. And this is what I use to mask off the top of the Overwatch symbol. And boom. Again, you know, you can look at it and you can see what I've done. I've mirrored great. We've done this. We've done all of these things. and I used it creatively to combine with the other shapes, and then use this to subtract and then add on the gradient. So all right, so I wanted to take a moment to explain some alternatives, right? And the reason I use some things over others, and it will also change for you. So as you can see here, the blue nodes are the easier ones, meaning very easy to use. And the pink ones are the faster ones, right? And you can see by the timings. It's not a lot faster here, but it depends on what is going on in Designer, on your computer, and whatever. It does scale. So let's start with a star. So this is a star, obviously. It's a star node. Right? You can just drag a star out. Congrats. And that's it, right? You can change the scale. And that is all you can do with this node. So if you literally just need a star, this is your node. However, with the polygon, you can change a bunch of settings to make it into a star, and it is faster. So let's add a polygon and create a star. So if we, change that to 5 sides, let's bring down the scale so we can see it a little better, and then reduce the triangle size in the X. You can create a star. Now, of course, it's not like perfect. I took some time to come here and make it pixel perfect. But depending on your needs, it is worth it, right? So this is one example. All right, I won't go into too much more detail. So the other example is the gradient linear 3. Again, this is one node. It allows you to tile and change the position of the midpoint, as you can see. And then you can also rotate it 90 degrees. So that's nice. And it isn't too much slower than the gradient axial reflected. Here, you can change the points in the viewport, the location of the edges of the gradient. So this gives you so much more control. You can like put it where you want it, and you can adjust it intuitively, right? It doesn't allow you to tile, as you can see here, but you can change the angle from, horizontal to vertical, and it's look at that. It's so much faster. So depending on your needs, again, this is the better pick. So let's undo that. There's not much else to say about that. So let's move on to the gradient linear 1. So let's double click this. You can see here, well, this is the most basic one. We all know this, tiling and then rotation 90. But the curve node, which can take an input and remap it, but you don't need an input. So if I double click this here, this is just a linear histogram, right? It's just straight up a curve. But if you look at the 2D view, it's the same information. So let me just move around some stuff here, undo. The timing looks really similar here, but in a lot of my tests it's lower. The curve does come out on top in most of my tests. I could be wrong, but I'm just saying. And obviously we have the added benefit of it being a curve. So we can literally just, we can really adjust how we want the gradient to operate and add a lot of points. And we have so much more flexibility, right? So that's another alternative there and how it works. And for the last one, see it's faster. And for the last one is the starburst. Now, this is obviously very niche, but as you can see, this is how it starts. So if we bring in the starburst, you're greeted with a starburst. So you can actually create a shape like this very quickly or almost instantly. Whereas with the splatter circular, you have some work to do, right? You have to, well, I'm not going to show you now, but whoops, you can, make that longer, the size in the Y, increase the petal amount, well, pattern amount here, change this scale and do all these things. But in the end, you end up with, as you can see here, I rotated it a bit, but the difference is it is chopped in half, like the cook time. So depending on, again, your needs, this is the better pick. If you have the time to dedicate to getting it closer to what you want, this is honestly, this is the better pick, period, because you can adjust where the starburst is located. It's just better. So that's why I always use the splatter circular. But I just wanted to go through these differences here, especially for the gradients, because they look all the same, but you know, depending on your needs, like you could just shave off a lot of time and become a lot more efficient. So I wanted to go through that real quick. And if I come up with any other alternatives, I'll probably just drop a new video or maybe put it in the comments of this video. I don't know, but yeah, so thanks. And I hope this helps save you some seconds. I think I'll leave it here because it doesn't make sense, you know, making a 10-hour video of shapes. You could just come up with any shape at this point. So what I will say is I would like you to go and explore, like look at some shapes in front of you. I'm pretty sure you have some symbols or anything like that you can break down and try to replicate, because I didn't create this for this video. I was messing around and I was like, oh crap, I can actually make this in Designer. So there are a lot of different things you can do with this. Is just some exploration, but there are a lot of different things you can do in Designer, so don't limit it to just this video. Take this and try to create more shapes that you see in places, you know, like just try to create more cool stuff, and it will drill in some of the things you need to create better textures. And also decals. Remember, you can use Substance for decals. So anyway, I think I'll wrap up this video here. Let's just go back to where it all began. Just like this heart, I would like you to like and subscribe to see some more videos. But yeah, I hope the video was fun, at least if nothing else. I know it's a bit of a long one, but I hope it's fun and it's a video you can come back to if you ever forget, oh shoot, how do I make a heart or a shape or something simple that you might want to add on to. I'm thinking about making a video of creating your own shape node, right? I guess you can tell me in the comments if this is something you would be interested in, but I do think it would be cool if you could drag in our type and put in your own shape your own shape node, and have all these cool shapes that you created once available to you in the future whenever you need to create a heart or a teardrop or whatever. So yeah, that's it for this video, and the next video I have planned is another shape video, but this time we'll either be going through basic flowers or digital symbols, maybe, or even mechanical symbols. I'll see, but stay tuned. Subscribe if you want to not miss it at least. And yeah, thanks for watching. So I'll see you in the next one. Respect. Protect.